If you are listening to this right now, there is like a really good chance you're a retail executive. And if that's true, I mean, you have absolutely lived this specific nightmare.
Oh, yeah. The classic rollout nightmare.
Right. So you and your leadership team, you just spent, what, 3 months locked in a conference room. You hammered out this brilliant, just bulletproof corporate strategy.
And the slide deck is completely flawless.
Flawless. The rollout plan is meticulous. You hit send on that massive communication out to all the stores, and you're feeling like you just solved retail,
You're popping the champagne.
Exactly. But then, like a month later, you walk onto an actual store floor, and it is as if that memo never existed.
Yeah, the displays are wrong.
No, wrong. The associates are using the old greeting, and your brilliant strategy is just nowhere to be found.
It's the universal retail heartbreak, really. I mean, you look around, you see the strategy just hasn't translated to frontline execution, and the immediate executive reaction is usually just frustration.
Yeah, for sure.
The assumption is that the associates just aren't paying attention, or worse, they just don't care.
Right. You wonder, like, did they even read it? Are they just actively ignoring us at headquarters?
Well, according to a really compelling white paper we're diving into today from Multimedia Plus, which is titled, Why Associates Stop Trusting Corporate Communication, the answer is yes, they are ignoring you.
It's entirely your fault.
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this because the central thesis here is just a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. It totally shifts the blame from the floor back to the corporate office. Because the core idea in this source is that associates do not ignore corporate messages because they're inherently resistant to information or, just stubborn.
Right.
They ignore them because their lived experience on the floor has taught them that the information coming from corporate is likely irrelevant or outdated or completely disconnected from their day-to-day reality, which means this breakdown isn't happening because of, like, one single poorly worded memo. It's a slow erosion, right? Trust is being chipped away piece by piece over months or even years.
Yeah, it's a cumulative effect. We have to look at what every single piece of communication actually represents to the person receiving it. The white paper points out that every time corporate sends a message to an associate, it carries this implied promise.
An implied promise.
Exactly. And that promise is simply, this information matters to you and will help you do your job.
But if I'm an executive, I'm thinking I don't have the bandwidth to curate 50 different versions of one update just to make sure it's perfectly tailored. Like, I have a business to run. I need to get the message out today to everyone, and I just have to trust them to filter out what they need.
And that is the exact mindset that breaks the implied promise.
Wow, okay.
When you force the associate to be the filter, they start building this defensive layer of skepticism. The source provides some painfully specific examples of how this plays out in the real world.
Oh, yeah, those examples were rough.
Right. So think about an associate working in, like, a small standard format store in a mall. Suddenly, they receive a massive, highly detailed visual merchandising update that only applies to a 3-story flagship location.
Totally useless to them.
Completely. Or consider a really sensitive HR policy change that is strictly meant for store managers, but oops, it gets blasted out to the entire part-time seasonal workforce by mistake.
Or a regional promotion meant entirely for the West Coast showing up in the inbox of an associate working in Boston. It's just infuriating. Honestly, thinking about it, it's exactly like being trapped in one of those massive corporate reply-all email chains.
Oh, the worst.
That has absolutely nothing to do with your department. At first, you read them, right? Trying to figure out if you missed something important. But by the 15th email about a jammed printer on the 3rd floor, you just start auto-deleting everything without even glancing at the subject line.
You have to.
Yeah, you literally train yourself to ignore the noise just to survive the workday.
And what's fascinating here is what that pattern signals to the front line. It creates this massive us versus them divide.
Oh, absolutely.
To the associate, a constant stream of irrelevant messages says loud and clear that the corporate team has zero understanding of their actual role, their specific location, or just the physical realities of standing on a sales floor for 8 hours.
It adds friction to their day.
Right. Every irrelevant message means they have to stop serving a customer, open the alert, read it, try to interpret it, realize it's completely useless, and then try to regain their focus.
So the bleeding stops with precision. Like the baseline requirement has to be absolute surgical targeting by role, location, department, and language. But I'll push back on the reality of this.
Okay, go ahead.
I've seen what happens when corporate realizes their messages are being ignored. Their first instinct is rarely to get more precise. Their first instinct is usually to turn up the volume, to say the exact same thing, just louder and more often, across way more channels.
Yeah, the old, if they didn't hear it the first time, let's just yell it, strategy.
Exactly.
If lack of relevance is the first way corporate loses trust, well, this is the second. They try to fix a quality problem with quantity.
But hold on, doesn't retail actually require repetition? Like, you can't just launch a new strategic priority, say, hey, here is the new customer greeting once in January,
Yeah.
and expect it to hold up in November. You have to keep brand standards top of mind.
Well, the source makes a vital distinction to address that exact point. Reinforcement and duplication are not the same thing.
Okay, break that down.
Reinforcement is a business necessity. Duplication is just noise. Associates instantly recognize when a message has simply been recycled.
Oh, for sure. They can spot it a mile away.
Right. If you send the exact same announcement, using the same corporate speak with no new guidance, and you don't even acknowledge that they've seen this before, you're offering zero new value, it just makes headquarters look totally disconnected and desperate.
The white paper highlights a compounding problem here that just sounds like an absolute nightmare for the store level. It happens when multiple corporate silos communicate about the exact same initiative, but they do it completely independently of one another.
Oh, it is rampant in large organizations. So operations sends out a directive about a new product launch. Then, like 2 days later, learning and development sends out a mandatory training module about the same launch.
Right.
And then marketing sends out a promotional memo detailing the signage for that launch.
So technically the information might all be accurate, but to the associate, it doesn't feel like one cohesive strategy at all. It feels like 3 separate, totally overwhelming demands hitting them from different departments.
Which is why the rule has to be that repetition only works if it adds value. A follow-up cannot just be a carbon copy.
It has to have something fresh.
Exactly. It must include something new. Give them a practical example of the new behavior working in a real store. Give them a new selling technique. Give them answers to frequently asked questions that have bubbled up since the initial announcement.
You have to respect their time enough to give them an actual reason to open that second message.
Yeah, and this is where the source mentions that technology platforms like Insight are stepping in to sort of centralize this chaos.
Wait, let's clarify that for the listener really quick. When we talk about a platform like Insight, what does that actually look like for the frontline worker? Like, are we talking about a portal on the back office computer or an app on their phone?
Think of it as a unified branded environment. It's usually accessed via a mobile device or a store tablet that the associate carries with them right on the floor.
Oh, okay, so it's right there with them.
Right. Instead of operations, marketing, and L&D all bombarding the store through these different methods, a platform like Insight acts as a single gateway. It brings task management, multimedia training, and corporate communications all into one interface.
Nice.
So instead of 3 disconnected emails, the associate gets one cohesive, purposeful brief from the brand.
Okay, that makes visualizing the solution much easier. So let's say a retail executive gets this all right. The message is perfectly targeted, it's highly relevant, and it's delivered through a unified platform. Problem solved.
Wow.
Not necessarily, because we have to talk about the tyranny of bad timing. I mean, even a perfectly crafted message is going to fail entirely if it hits the store at the absolute wrong moment.
This is a huge blind spot for headquarters because corporate environments and store environments operate on entirely different biological clocks, so to speak.
That's a great way to put it.
Corporate teams are sitting at desks, right? They're actively monitoring screens, waiting for updates and emails. Store associates are in constant motion. They're managing foot traffic, unloading pallets, de-escalating customer complaints, and executing physical tasks.
The examples in the white paper are just wince-inducing for anyone who has ever worked a floor set. Imagine a detailed visual merchandising update arriving at the store after the team has already spent 6 hours completing the display based on the old instructions.
You've just guaranteed hours of physical rework. The associates aren't going to praise corporate for the update. They are going to curse them for being out of touch.
Seriously. Or consider a massive, highly detailed training program dropped into the system right in the middle of a high-traffic holiday weekend. You are putting the associate in an impossible position.
Yeah, a total lose-lose.
They either ignore the training to help the customer, or they ignore the customer to complete the training.
Timing communicates respect. When headquarters schedules their communication around the operational realities of the store, like the peak traffic periods, the opening and closing routines, the shipment delivery windows, They demonstrate that they actually understand what it takes to run a store.
And it's not just when the message arrives, it's the chaotic web of where it lives.
Wow.
Without a centralized platform, the fragmentation of channels is just staggering.
Oh, it's everywhere.
An associate might get information through a company email, a secure messaging app on a Zebra device, a dusty printed binder sitting in the break room, and whatever their shift manager half remembers during a morning huddle. So what does this all mean for the frontline worker?
Well, it means they are forced to play detective just to do their jobs.
Yeah.
They have to waste their shift cross-referencing information.
Mm-hmm.
Does the email sent yesterday supersede the printed binder from last week?
Right.
Did the store manager get an even newer version on a conference call? Is this update a suggestion, or is it a mandatory compliance task?
And that detective work severely weakens operational confidence. Associates shouldn't have to launch an investigation into a message's accuracy before they can act on it.
Yeah.
If they have to guess which source is the real source of truth, execution is just always going to be inconsistent.
Let's keep building this out. Let's assume you fixed the timing, eliminated the fragmented channels, and targeted the message perfectly.
Okay.
You still have to ensure the associate actually understands the underlying why of the task, and corporate has to measure the right outcomes.
Yes, because communication without context doesn't feel like guidance. It feels like a command. Complete this training module. Move this display 3 feet to the left. Start saying this specific phrase to every customer. It is entirely transactional.
And when you strip away the context, they might know what to do, but they have absolutely no idea why it matters. Research actually shows that associates remain engaged when they understand how their specific, localized tasks connect to the broader purpose of the brand.
That makes total sense.
The white paper suggests every piece of communication must explicitly answer 4 questions. Why does this matter? What do I need to do? When does it need to happen? And where can I get help if something goes wrong?
If you don't give them the why, you cannot be surprised when they give you the absolute bare minimum on the what. But that brings up a massive friction point for executives. Measurement. How does corporate traditionally prove to the board that our rollout was successful? They use read receipts and completion rates.
The classic compliance metrics.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Relying on read receipts to gauge actual understanding is completely flawed. Think about every time you download a new software update. You scroll to the absolute bottom of a 40-page terms and conditions, pop up in 2 seconds, and click, I agree, without reading a single syllable.
We all do it.
Exactly. The system logged your completion rate at 100%, but you couldn't tell me a single thing you just agreed to.
This raises an important question for any executive listening. What are you actually trying to measure? Read receipts only monitor compliance. They prove someone clicked a button. They do not prove comprehension.
But if I'm an executive, I have to report something up the chain, right? If I abandon completion rates, what metrics am I supposed to use to prove my team is actually doing their job?
Well, you don't abandon metrics, you evolve them. The mindset has to shift from did associates click complete to did the communication actually work? The source details how a platform like Insight uses short, integrated knowledge checks and question-level analytics. This turns measurement into a discovery tool rather than a surveillance tool.
Walk us through how that changes the dynamic.
Okay, so if you push a new policy and your analytics show that 60% of your stores are failing a specific question about the return window, that doesn't mean you have thousands of bad associates.
Right.
It means your corporate communication was confusing, or maybe the phrasing was ambiguous. Real-time analytics allow corporate to identify weak content and proactively fix the message, rather than waiting 3 months and punishing the store managers for low compliance.
It changes the entire relationship from a dictatorship to a dialogue. You are basically auditing your own communication strategy in real time. Okay, we are rounding the corner here. Let's bring this all together.
Right.
How does a retail executive take these insights and immediately apply them? Because as the source makes very clear, you cannot fix broken trust with just another corporate memo about improving communication.
No, you definitely can't. The trust has to be rebuilt through the experience of the communication itself. The white paper provides an executive playbook with 8 standards. But rather than just reading a list, let's look at the operational friction of actually doing this, because implementing these standards requires real structural changes at headquarters.
Okay, let's group them. The first bucket is what we could call the precision engine. This includes Standard 1, target every message, Standard 3, make priorities obvious, and Standard 4, design for the front line.
Design for the front line means abandoning the corporate PDF entirely.
Good riddance.
Right. You have to use concise language, mobile-friendly formats, and short video examples. You are designing for someone who has maybe 3 uninterrupted minutes between customer interactions, not someone sitting at a desk with a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And making priorities obvious means the associate should know instantly if an alert is just informational, highly recommended, or an urgent compliance issue.
But the real friction at headquarters happens in the second bucket, which we'll call the empathy loop. This includes Standard 2, coordinate the corporate calendar, Standard 5, respect store timing, Standard 6, add value with follow-ups, and Standard 8, close the feedback loop.
Coordinating the corporate calendar is incredibly difficult in a siloed business.
Oh, I bet.
It requires operations, marketing, and L&D to actually sit down, look at a unified calendar, and negotiate their rollouts so they don't collide on the store floor. It forces corporate departments to compromise for the sake of the associate.
I can just imagine the turf wars in those meetings, you know? Like my promotional rollout is more important than your compliance training. But if they don't fight that battle at headquarters, they're just exporting that chaos to the 19-year-old associate on the floor.
Exactly. And the most challenging standard for corporate egos is closing the feedback loop. When frontline associates use these platforms to render questions or point out that a new display physically doesn't fit in a standard store layout, you have to acknowledge their input.
You can't just ignore it.
No, and more importantly, you must communicate what you changed as a result of their feedback. That is the only way to prove this isn't just a one-way surveillance system.
Which brings us back to why relying on a unified technology platform is so critical. Executing that level of coordination, targeting, and feedback manually across thousands of stores is virtually impossible. You need an environment that handles the logistics so executives can actually focus on the strategy.
It allows an executive to turn chaotic corporate noise into frontline operational confidence.
So to summarize our journey today, corporate communication is not and should never be measured by the sheer volume of messages sent from headquarters. It is measured entirely by whether your frontline associates believe those messages are actually worth receiving.
And to the retail executives listening, just remember that your frontline teams are the literal face of your brand. When execution suffers because of disconnected, noisy communication, it is the customer experience that takes the direct hit.
The stakes are incredibly high. We're going to leave you with a final thought today, something to really chew on during your next leadership meeting. We've spent this entire time talking about how bad communication causes associates to ignore corporate. But what if the opposite is also true?
Is this a good point?
Look at your absolute highest performing stores right now. The ones just crushing their sales goals and customer satisfaction metrics. If you really look closely at how they operate, is it possible that your best store managers are succeeding precisely because they are acting as a shield?
Wow.
What if they are intentionally filtering out and ignoring 80% of your corporate communication just to give their associates the peace and quiet they need to actually sell? And if your most successful locations are the ones ignoring you the most, what does that say about the true value of your communication strategy?
That is a terrifying question for an executive to ask.
Yeah.
But, it might be the most necessary one.
That's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.